have been looking forward to this discussion for quite some time. We're going to meet Katya De Luisa, which I probably botched her last name, but she has written a book, Journey Through the Infinite Mind. But one of the things that she discusses in her book is awareness, is the awareness of our loved ones in the later stage of dementia. And let me welcome Katya to the stage, and we're going to get to know her and learn a little bit more about, the awareness of our loved ones and our clients who have dementia. So Katya, if you want to turn your video and audio on, we will, there you go.
Okay,
Excellent.
here we are.
And folks, this is our discussion with Katya. One of the coolest things about it is it's just totally showing that the positive aging community is completely global. Katya is 3,700 miles away from me in Washington, D.C., Costa Rica. And we're going to all, not to mention, we're going to talk about exploring awareness of dementia, but also, hopefully we'll talk a little bit about your efforts to educate people in Costa Rica and the surrounding regions there as well. But before we dive into this, Katya, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll jump into conversation.
Okay, most of my life I've been a professional artist, let's say, and I started doing art therapy because I realized that my own art was therapeutic for myself. I had issues, and the art helped me out. So I started creating art therapies for organizations. Long story short, I'd lived in Central America for many years, working with street children in 5 different countries, doing arts programs in different organizations that work with these kids. And I went to the States, and in Sarasota, Florida, I got a job working in a small ALF to create an arts therapy program for their residents. There were 28 residents. It was a beautiful little place. But unfortunately, what I didn't know was that the 28 residents had different stages of cognitive decline. And I knew nothing, absolutely nothing about dementia. And so my first attempts to create anything art related with them was a fiasco. So I spent about, I'd say almost a month just going in every single day. I went in every single day. I walked with them. I talked with them. I helped feed them. I wanted them to tell me what their world was like. What is dementia? And then I started studying voraciously. I'm a bit of an obsessive compulsive, and when I put my mind to something, there's nothing else in the world that exists. So I started studying everything I possibly could about dementia. And I decided the best thing to do was to do a one-on-one program with a companion who would help the person with dementia with the logistics of doing collage work. So the logistics meaning the companion would cut and paste, and the person with dementia would just pick the magazine images and the placement. Over time, I discovered that they always seemed to pick pictures that had to do with their lives. Now we're talking about even people in the very last stages of dementia actually could sit for 1 hour with the companion, focusing on a magazine and listening to what the companion was saying and pick pictures. And so I started to ask myself, there's got to be something more to this. Then one day, and this is really important, one day, Mary, who had been with her husband for 7 years in that nursing home, going every single day, he was incredibly late stage. She actually got him to sit for an hour with her every workshop. And one day she started crying and she said, "Oh my God, oh my God." And I said, "What happened, Mary?" And she said, "I never realized that James was here until today." And I said, "Why?" And she showed me the collage, and she says, "He kept picking these words, and I didn't want to put them in, but he kept picking them. And up in the corner of his little collage, it said, 'I'm okay, I'm alive.'" Late stage, incredibly nonverbal for probably 5 years. And he picked those words, I'm okay, I'm alive. I approached the Alzheimer's Association in my area. They saw the validity of the therapy. We got a pretty sizable grant from the Community Foundation, and I started developing caregiver workshops of this process. And then eventually I did conferences with both Alzheimer's Association and hospice, and traveled around the United States training the therapy. So
I
it gave me
love
a
it.
really good view into the inner world of the person with dementia.
And how long ago was this that you were, where you stumbled into this through art in an assisted living community in Florida? How many years ago?
25 years ago.
25 years ago. So
Mhm.
you've really uh, been at this for quite some time.
Yes.
Now, well, actually, this is what I love about these discussions. Trin already has a question for Katya, and she says, because of your therapeutic approach, supports yourself and others, what is the most satisfying way you are doing your practice right now? And she was, great question, Trin. Yeah, tell us, like, what gives you the most satisfaction for yourself and for the other people that you work with?
I think the biggest satisfaction I get is when I do talks and workshops, changing the perception of the caregiver from the victim to understanding more about the inner world of the person with dementia. So it creates an empathetic understanding, and their care changes. And that, I think, is the most, that gives me more joy than anything. And the reason for that is I started this to give a voice to those who had no voice. And by doing that, I'm giving a voice to the loved ones of caregivers so that they can understand that they're still there.
I love it. And I imagine that when somebody, like the story that you just shared, where I'm okay, I'm alive, like that has to make you and the people that you're working with just feel wonderful that they they're recognizing that their caregiver is aware of them when they thought they weren't.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Okay, so now I want to, we're going to dive into a bunch of things here, but what I want to start off with is I dropped this into chat. I want to, let me share your website, and then we will move to your book and explore the table of contents, which is what I love doing with authors, and dive into why you wrote the book and what it's all about. But here is your website. It's the Dementia Learning Institute, and I think one of the great things, folks, about Katya, if anything she says resonates and you think that somebody like Katya might be helpful for you or your family or your clients, folks can work with you directly through, even though you're in Costa Rica, you work on a virtual platform, correct?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Okay, great.
I do consultations also for nursing homes and for individuals.
Excellent. And so, so folks, you can go to Katya's website. I'll put her email in the chat, and you can reach out to her if you've got questions. And I believe you do an initial free consultation before you would engage with folks. And the other great thing about working with Katya is she speaks excellent Espanol. And
Yes.
I heard her right before we got on speaking, so that can be very helpful. Now, on your website, we can, if you scroll down, we can click over to the book Journey of the Infinite Mind. It's on Amazon. You can order it there. But what I love doing with authors is taking a peek at the table of contents, and you can see here we've got 14 chapters in your book. But before we dive into the chapters, and I think we're going to focus mainly on chapter 8 and chapter 9, Chapter 8 is mind and consciousness, and chapter 9 is perception. But before we dive into the book, tell us what inspired you to write this book, and what can people expect when they when they order it?
Well, while I was working for the Alzheimer's Association, I couldn't talk about mind and consciousness. I couldn't talk about spirituality of the human being. I had to stay within the perimeters of the box that dementia information sort of exists within. And I remember the director of the chapter told my boss that you better reel her in. She's a wild card. She can only talk about what's scientifically proven. Well, what was scientifically proven 25 years ago is now scientific fact. Much of it is scientific fact right now. So I wrote the book because I just burned out. I just burned out on nursing homes. I burned out on organizations. I burned out on the small minds. And I felt that with caregivers, you needed to expand their minds. They needed to go beyond the box, and they needed to think for themselves, because each person, each loved one is an individual, but with similar situations amongst pretty much everybody. But you have to kind of get to that individual, and they have to think. So I just stopped the work and I spent a year writing the book. It's a labor of love. And I said, well, I'm just going to say what I want to say. And that's what the book is. The book is all of those things that I really wasn't allowed to say back 25 years ago.
I love it. So that we spoken like a true artist is that that exploring I love it. So now let's take I'm going to jump to the table of contents here. And today, I think what we're going to dive into significantly is what you've got in chapter 8 and chapter 9. So help me kind of and help our audience sort of understand this confusing topic of awareness in stages of dementia.
All right. In my workshops, I would usually start with asking people if they believe the mind and the brain are the same, and meaning that not the brain thinking, but is the mind and the brain the same? And most people automatically said no. Well, then what is the mind? Then we have to figure out, okay, what is the mind and versus the brain? Brain has brain-generated thoughts. Thoughts are the neurons within the brain that are firing constantly. I mean, we think when we're sleeping, we dream. The brain never sleeps. The brain is constantly going. But it is, like I like to call it, it's the operating system for the meat suit. This basically, to me, is the physical body is a meat suit, and the brain is part of the meat suit. The mind is more than just the casing. In other words, the mind is the driver of the car. The mind is the spark of energy in the machine. So when we look at the brain as basically something that can be damaged, but then we look at the mind and we go, well, can the mind be damaged if the brain's damaged? And I say no. So I started to do a lot of research on science and how the brain works. And I wanted to be able to correlate my theories with scientific fact, or at least fact that had already been accepted as fact. And basically, when someone dies, for instance, there are thousands of reports of people who have either died or been on the operating table. They're not supposed to be able to hear things, or they've been brain dead for as long as 20 minutes, where there's absolutely no brain waves, coming back and being totally conscious during that time when the operating system was considered dead. There are people in comas have been considered to be gone or not there for years and years, until they found out that 40% of coma patients are consciously aware. Cerebral palsy for years and years was considered to be also a mental problem, not just a physical problem. Again, we have damage to the operating system, which is the brain. And so many of them were there when parents would put them in institutions thinking that they were going to be a vegetable the rest of their lives. Can you imagine being aware during that time? So I started asking myself a lot about, especially after the situation with Mary and James, of what kind of awareness exists within the human spirit, the human person. And is that awareness gone simply because the brain that keeps you connected to this world around us? I mean, our five senses is what we are perceiving. In other words, there is no world out there if we don't have five senses. We can exist, but if our five senses aren't working, to all extents and purposes to us, the world doesn't exist out there. We can't hear, see, smell, taste it, touch it. So basically, our five senses connected to our central command brain is what keeps us in the world. It keeps us communicating. It teaches us how to communicate with each other, for instance. So if those five senses are altered, which all five of them become altered during dementia, and they can no longer communicate, does that mean that they're still not aware? These are all questions I ask. I ask people questions. I don't say, oh, I have all the answers, because I don't. I'm still questioning myself. I'm still trying to figure out so many aspects of this. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't know. Would you like to take that farther? Let's, help me along
without a
here.
doubt. No, without a doubt. I love it. And I love that you're questioning this because, like I said, I can see how if 25 years ago, when you're in a structured environment with an association or a nursing home, that asking these questions might be outside the lines and dangerous area, creating hope for people. But an organization might view as a liability. So I love this. So what you're saying makes sense. Okay.
Mhm.
But what can when our loved one doesn't remember us and is not communicating, it's like, what you, I love the collage idea and I love these techniques. And so I guess, what can you do to help us um, with our loved ones? And what are some tools that we might use that can uncover the awareness that our loved one has?
Okay, first of all, you have to look at memory. Like in my book, I'm teaching not only dementia, what's going on with dementia, I'm also teaching you how your own brain functions. Now, when someone doesn't remember who you are, all right, too often we judge outer behavior as to who the person is now. Okay, so I lost my mother. I can't tell you how many people say, I lost my mother, I lost my father, she's gone. One family even held a wake for their mother, and she was still alive in the nursing home, so you could get over the emotional sadness of losing their mother to dementia. When the mother says, who are you? What's your name? Well, who are you? She has forgotten your role. She has not forgotten you. She's forgotten, when she forgets your name, she's forgotten your label. And our labels are there, our names are there, just to separate us from our siblings. Imagine, I have 12 siblings, and imagine if they were all named Katya. So basically, they're losing the label and they're losing the role, whether you're the daughter, the husband, whatever role you're playing in life, connected to them, that's getting lost. If you pay attention and you're not devastated by that, and you pay attention, you will realize that they recognize you as someone important to them, which means they're connected through their heart. Now, I have a whole other talk that I could give on heart intelligence. I mean, there's been a lot of scientific proof of heart intelligence and heart communication. The heart cannot be damaged by dementia. The heart is separate from the brain. It actually has its own neuronal system, and it gives more messages to the brain than the brain does to the heart. So unless the person has heart issues, medical issues, the communication with a person with dementia is through the heart, which means a lot of it is nonverbal, a lot of it's physical, a lot of it's touching. You have to touch because they're out in the stratosphere. They need to be pulled back with you by love and by caring and expressing yourself in such a way that they feel safe with you. I mean, you cannot feel safe with the people who you've loved your whole life just because they see you in a different way. People with dementia have an incredible ability to read nonverbal communication, your body language, your face, your facial expressions, your tone of voice, just your energetic feel. You know, when someone's angry, it's just like everything around them starts to vibrate in a very violent manner, even if they're not screaming or hitting or anything like that. They pick that up. They pick that up, and it becomes them. They do not have the rationalization to understand that this is your emotion or why you're feeling that way because you've been up all night with them all night and you're tired and you're cranky, and they can't understand that, but they can feel your irritation and they can feel your anger and they can feel your tiredness, and they take it on as though it's them feeling it, and then they're going to feed it right back to you. When the caregiver starts to understand how the inner world of the person with dementia is, then they become more effective caregivers, and their relationship with their loved one reconnects.
Man,
And that's more important than care.
I love this. Okay, first off, I'd never heard of heart intelligence, and I dropped a little definition in chat. It says the flow of awareness, understanding, and intuition we experience when the mind and emotions are brought into coherent alignment with the heart. And I think, just as you know, thinking about caregivers out there, just awareness that there is this heart intelligence is very important. And the other thing that you're talking about is how people with dementia and cognitive impairment can read and react to our feelings. And this is, I mean, every dementia expert out there says getting angry with somebody who has dementia will only create a more stressful situation for everyone. And so, you know, when you say, Dad, don't you remember who I am? What you're saying, Katya, is what Dad sees is an angry person. And how do you expect him to react if he sees an angry person?
It's a little more profound than that because
Good. Dive deeper.
okay, let's dive deeper. Science, we'll talk science. We are all energetic beings. In other words, this meat suit that we have gives off energy, just like the computer gives off energy, the refrigerator gives off energy, and the neurons require energy in order to communicate. In other words, for our brain to function, it functions with electrical energy. Well, that creates an electromagnetic field that actually goes beyond your body. So basically what you're doing is you're giving off sparks when you're angry. Let's say we're giving off sparks, and that spark hits the other person. Next thing you know, that person's angry. Of course they're going to get angry. But the difference with dementia is the fact that they can't understand that this is your feelings. They can't look at your face and see your anger and say, oh, she's angry about something. No, they see the anger. They take it on like it's their own anger. They feel it like it's their own anger, and they'll feed it back. Now, the reverse of that is when they feel love and tenderness from someone, they also take that on and will feed it back. Now, there are times that the wiring is just going haywire. There are times, but I found there are much more times when the caregiver is feeding the negative emotion to the person, and without trying to do it. They love the person. They're just trying their best. But the problem is that when you're tired, when you're irritated, it's with you. And you don't have to say anything or do anything. It's just there. It's just this energetic field around you, and they pick that up.
Man,
They pick it up.
this is great. And Pamela says, we're always making emotional memories. Our emotions can also be subconscious. And I guess this is what I think one of the challenges, I forgot how you described it, is that a person with dementia is not sort of operating by the specific labels that we're used to. Um, it, I frame that again. They know.
Okay, your name is your label, your role as daughter or husband or wife or whatever is just your role. They're losing the labels and the roles. Okay, and that includes everything else. How do you describe this? They actually lose the ability very early, actually, especially with Lewy bodies, is very early. Many people lose the ability to label their own emotions. In other words, I talked with a man with Lewy bodies, and I asked him, he was talking about some new people came to the house and how he couldn't find words, and I said, well, how did that make you feel? He couldn't find feelings. He couldn't describe feelings. He would just tell me, well, then I did this and then I did that. I said, no, how did it make you feel? And he would look at me very confused, like, what's a feeling? So he couldn't, feelings are a label. That's a label for emotions. Emotions are a label. Every word that we have is a label for something. And so they start to lose what the connection of that label or that word is to whatever it's connected to. Understanding that's very important. I always suggest for caregivers, if you say, for instance, would you like lunch? Don't say, would you like lunch? Just hand it to them. Just bring lunch and say, and here's your lunch, so that they can visually connect with what you're saying to what they're visually seeing. Hold up a couple shirts. This shirt, the blue one or the white one, which one you like? Visually connect to what you're saying or what you're hearing, what they're hearing. The collage communication was visual and auditory because the companion would talk about the pictures. Oh, you have a dog in there. Oh, I used to have dogs. Did you ever have a dog? You'd be surprised how even nonverbal people would come up and say one or two words that they hadn't said in years, because visuals were connected to what the question was, what was being discussed. So they could focus on the visual without focusing on where the voice was coming from, which was very important because they can't do the two at the same time.
I love it. Great thoughts. Okay. Betty has a question, and is how do you handle the frustration and anger expressed by the person who has dementia? Maybe some examples, or what guidance would you give
Okay.
somebody like Betty that has a loved one who's angry and frustrated?
Okay, first of all, start by acknowledging that they're upset. You can say, I see that you're upset, but your tone of voice, you have to really watch your body language, watch your face, watch your tone of voice. Put the tone of voice, if you have to, in a very monotone. Better to put it in a kind, caring, loving way, but just say, I see you're upset. I want to help you. And you can, if it's your mom or whatever, you can say, Mom, I love you and I really want to help. And if it's a firing, because sometimes it's a dementia firing, the firing is just going on in their brain and they can't help it, and there's nothing outside that seems to be able to calm that, leave the room. At least leave the room for, keep your eye on them, but leave the room. Do not stay in their presence. Then when things start to calm down, it takes two to get angry, so it's really hard to be angry at nothing. So when they start to calm down a little bit, you come in and you say, bring some food, bring something that they love. You can also say when they're getting angry, oh, wow, I tell you what, I know what might make you feel better. I've got some cookies in the kitchen. And I'm not real fond of the sugar idea, but they are in love with sugar. There's a whole reason as to why they remain. The only taste that remains is sweet, but that's a whole nother conversation. So have them, if they start to eat, the firing to the anger triggering will move to another part of the brain that has to do with taste and food and and calm them down. You want to redirect when you can redirect. And you also want to be able to look at the symptoms or look and watch. When people are about to get angry, I was also a home caregiver for a while. I did that for a while. And I learned, and I had some angry people, believe me. And I learned to see the signs before they exploded. In other words, before the brain could start firing into the angry mode, I would redirect them before they got angry.
Yeah, because you can discover these patterns and then discover what makes our loved one upset. I love this comment from Michaela. Michaela says the prefrontal cortex might be slower, but the amygdala is not. My father and I used to play football with a balloon, a favorite pastime, a favorite highlight from his past. So dad loves football. Obviously, reflexes and what have you,
Right.
you're not going to get out in the backyard, but playing with a balloon and talking about football, you could see where that could ignite some positive memories and just riff on that one a little bit, Katya.
Okay, remember that every cell in your body has memory. Every cell in your body has intelligence. Every single cell. These are things I talk about. This is what I really loved about learning about dementia, was I actually learned about the human mechanism. So when he kicks, that was something he loved to do. When you do something physical that you love to do, it's a stronger connection in your memory, which means it'll be in your later stages of dementia, that will be your long-term memories that remain because you were emotionally connected to whatever you were doing. And he obviously loved football. So believe it or not, every cell in his feet and his legs, everything has memory. So you push the balloon towards him and he automatically kicks. So anything that your loved one loved to do, there is still residual memories of that process.
Now, one thing that I see when I visit memory care communities is there's oftentimes linens and things of that nature that people can fold and put in laundry baskets. And I was told years ago that the demographic of many of the people living here, they were homemakers and they enjoyed folding laundry, and this is very therapeutic. Is that kind
of course, and also babies, they never lose what they loved. They never lose what they loved. If they loved animals, they will love animals forever. If they love babies, if they love doing a certain thing, that is there, but it's not a brain thought process. Remember, there's a difference between awareness of what's going on and thinking about what's going on. Okay. And that's where people get caught up because they don't understand that she's not going to think, oh, this is like my dog Charlie I used to have, or oh, I used to love doing this. No, those thought processes aren't there, but they are aware of what they're doing feels good because it's connected to their emotional system. Okay. So anything that they loved, they never lose.
and Betty says, my sister responds to Andrea Bocelli. I believe I hope I pronounced that in a very positive manner when I play his CDs. So that's another great thing for all of us to be thinking about is the music that we love that and do you
All right, I have a suggestion with that. Music is an incredibly powerful element for the brain because it uses the whole brain. It's predominantly a right brain perception, but it uses the whole brain. And I've seen incredible results with people in later stages with MP3 players, where they program in their favorite music. and they put the headphones on because it cuts out all of the other distractions. It cuts out all the noise in the room, even a quiet room. I mean, I can hear my fan going in here. That all gets cut out except for the music. And I've actually seen videos. There's a wonderful video of a ballet dancer in her very last stages of dementia, sitting in a wheelchair. They put it on, and she was a professional ballet dancer. And they put on the headphones, and she started to move her arms as though she were on stage. And then she kind of signaled to the guy to bring up the volume. Now, she had no responses for years. The woman was in very late stages, and yet there was she was doing these gorgeous movements with her hands. And another one where a man started to talk, and they sing along. The words are always remembered. So music is an incredibly strong, I want to say, stimulant for the brain with people with dementia.
Okay, Sandra has a wonderful question that I'd love to hear your feedback on. And she says, "We married later in life, and I didn't know my husband in childhood. He's now living mostly in his early years, which were apparently traumatic. Any advice for a situation like this?"
That is okay. Our subconscious is 95% of our brain function. Every day, everything that we do, everything we think and so on is basically 5%. Our interactions are 5%. That 95% holds his traumas. The most important, I write articles weekly, and one of my articles was on trauma, and another one was on if you were a child abused by the person you're caring for. I always recommend don't, because you're going to have triggers that you can't help. They get triggered with their child abuse or their traumas. And you may never know that it's a trauma that they experience. You may never know. They'll just react in a strange, crazy, angry way. Well, maybe something reminds them of the trauma enough that their brain triggered. So what you want to do is, again, reroute those triggers. In this case with this lady, she needs to talk a lot. I mean, I would say 50 times a day, tell him how much you love him and that he's always safe because he's here with you. That you don't have to go to the trauma. You're not going to fix it. What you want him to do is feel safe. And you want him to feel safe with you. So you have to use those words. You have to say, "Don't worry, sweetheart, you're here with me now, and you're safe. I will always keep you safe. I'm here for you. I'm always here." And then hug him and kiss him, because they need that physical contact to bring them back into that. And then that creates an emotional spark, which starts to create an awareness memory. In other words, people say, "Oh, with dementia, they can't create memories." That's not true. That's not true. They just don't create verbal memories. They actually remember when you put them in a routine. They remember their routines. That's memory. So it's just not the kind of memory that we want to experience with them, but it's a memory that works for them. So I would say with trauma.
And I imagine a lot of this is, we talked about this in your whole inspiration. It's a little bit of experiment. It's experimenting. It's like it's seeing what resonates and what works and what language and how you would say "I love you," and maybe you get a better response, and then you fine tune it. But I love what you're saying is that this person is diving into a deep, dark, emotional area, and we want to make him feel safe.
Remember that people with dementia never feel safe. They're in a topsy-turvy world. I used to say it's like an ongoing acid trip. They're constantly, I mean, there's some of them are hallucinating, other ones are hearing things that aren't there. The world itself, their body, their actual body loses its position in space. we constantly know where our body is in space. They can't tell where their foot is. They can't tell where their hand is. They walk into a room, they could fall because they don't have the balance because they can't position themselves in the space around them. So if you can imagine what that must feel like, it must feel like you're moving through a void all the time. So they're in fear constantly. The main thing that caregivers need to create is a safe environment and that you are their advocate. You are there for them. Nobody else is more important. When I was caregiving, that I would have to take someone to lunch or whatever, and they would act out. I didn't care who was looking. I didn't care who was there. That person, my focus was always on that person. They knew they were safe with me.
Yeah.
Nobody else was more important than they were because they're scared.
Yeah. No, and this is, and I'm not saying this to infantilize anyone, but children, they when they're acting up in a restaurant and we as parents are sort of fine tuning, they want to feel safe too. They want to feel
Yes.
heard and what have you. Okay, Eileen has a very emotional thing that she'd like to share. And she says, my 90-year-old mom with dementia is occasionally combative and hits caregivers. The nursing home management has threatened to send her to a geriatric psychiatric facility far away that has terrible reviews unless I pay for 24-hour sitters, which I can't afford. I currently pay for an 8-hour daytime sitter and visit her daily. Any advice? And Eileen, my heart goes out to you. You are an amazing daughter. And Katya, any words of wisdom that you might share with?
Okay. The reason I kind of smiled at the beginning of that because it gave me it reminded me of this little woman, Betty. I mean, she was probably about 5 feet tall and she had an oxygen tank and so on. And she would just hit me for no reason whatsoever. We'd be walking and talking, everything was fine, and suddenly she'd punch me in the stomach. So it was, and she was strong. She was really strong for her size. That was just a firing in the brain. I applaud her also for trying to help her mother. You do need to juggle caregivers. You're going to have to juggle caregivers that understand this. And also you can talk. I'm not a strong proponent of medications unless it's the last thing, but you can talk to a doctor about medications to calm her down. I've found, and I am going to say this online, is CBD, which is a hemp derivative. CBD, you can find it in any health food store. It doesn't have, the marijuana, medical marijuana that everybody's, up and down about. It's CBD. It helps them sleep. It also starts to calm them down, and you give them drops several times a day. And it's natural. It doesn't have any side effects. I always recommend try CBD before you resort to medications. And they don't get drowsy from it, so it's not a fall risk. So try that first, and if that doesn't work, then talk to your doctor about some medications. But often the medications make them very drowsy. So I'm always concerned about medications.
And I imagine, and I'm brainstorming here with you for Eileen, is that when we're working with a loved one or a client who has dementia, who's combative, we're like detectives. You're trying to
Exactly.
figure out what is it that is aggravating this person, and
Yes.
what are some of the ways that maybe Eileen can put her detective hat on and see if she can
Okay.
discover this.
Okay. Try to notice, maybe even keep a notebook. Try to notice if she gets agitated. Usually I'm probably assuming she gets more agitated in the afternoons. People with Alzheimer's always get more agitated in the afternoons. It's called sundowning. People with dementia, where the brain is haywire and the brain's going all over the place, and it's really, really an effort for them to think. So by the time the afternoon rolls around, their brain's exhausted. Have you ever tried to study for an exam or any kind of heavy thinking, you yourself? your brain is just exhausted. At some point, it's just not going to work. I mean, mine just shuts off when I get brain exhausted. So, like Steve says, you have to be the detective. Cut down on her sugar. See if you can there's natural sugars that you can get. And I'm not talking about honey. There are, stevia is a natural sugar that doesn't have the sugar spikes, because that sugar is really, really bad for people with dementia because it causes emotional outbursts, the ups and downs, the highs and lows. And nobody seems to relate it to, oh, I'm giving her a cookie. She feels really good while she's eating that cookie. And then she's going to have a crash. When the crashes come, often anger comes and sadness or depression, all the other things that come with it. So sugar intake, really trying to give her natural sugars like through fruit, lots of fruit. Instead of a cookie, give her a piece of watermelon. The body can assimilate it better, and it doesn't have the spikes like the other sugar. So it's really just like Steve said, you become the detective and find out when and why she's having outbursts, especially if they're on a regular basis.
Okay, and then I know, Eileen, I think the other thing that, and feel free to reach out to me, Eileen, or Katya. I'm gonna put her information in there. But the other thing that I want to make sure that you're exploring is, it sounds like you're writing personal checks for your mom's care, based on the way you describe this. And I always get concerned about that, because we don't want to sacrifice your financial well-being for your mom, or we want to minimize it at least. And so I'd love to try to help you find resources, Medicaid, and programs the like that might be able to help with that as well. But good advice there, Katya. Chanel says, my mother is 90 with dementia. We care for her at home. At bedtime, she often does not want to get up from her jerry chair to use the bathroom and get into bed. We sometimes are unable to get her out of the chair until after midnight. Any suggestions on this? And folks, these are great questions. And I know we don't have the magic wand, but I'm hoping that ideas can come up. And also feel free, like, if you're out there in the audience and you've got ideas for Chanel too, throw them into chat.
Okay, I would suggest imagining you're her. She's 90 years old. She's got to have joint pain. She's got to have a lot of joint pain. And I'm 75, and I know when I sit for an hour or 2 hours, even after this talk, I'm stiff when I get up. She may be in pain. She has dementia. Now, the important part to understand about pain is they cannot recognize pain, and they cannot localize it, and they can't tell you they're in pain. So she may be in pain. It may be the way you're trying to lift her out of the chair. Maybe before she's going to go to bed, put her in a different chair, do something with her where she's not sitting in that chair for hours, and then you're going to ask her to get up and go to the bathroom. For me, I would just my instinct tells me that she's probably in pain when you move her. And so, be aware of that and see if there's something, whether it's the doctor's going to give you something for pain for her. So often they're in pain. So often, I can't even tell you. And they cannot describe it. They can't tell you they're in pain. They can't find their foot. So how are they going to find the pain in the foot? Now we're talking about as you're going into the later stages. So you ask them to lift their foot, and they look at you like, what's a foot? So it's really important to check physically when you're having problems with them, if they're in pain somewhere. People who don't want to eat, for instance, so many times their teeth are bad and it hurts them to eat. They're not going to say anything. But
No.
so many times, oh, my mother doesn't eat. Well, she doesn't eat because she's got. And then I had Frank, who I used to work with. He was in late stage, and he went into the nursing home, and he had a mouthful of food. I was helping him. He had a mouthful. He was And I told the girl, I says, listen, he can't eat this food. And they were giving him chunks of food to eat. And she says, oh, he always says that. And I said, yeah, because he can't. I was so furious. So I
Oh,
talked to his wife, and he had gone into the stages where he need pureed foods. He had already lost 25 pounds, and went on pureed foods, and he gained 15 in 2 weeks.
hmm.
So often you've got to be the detective. You've got to take a look that they're not trying to be difficult. They're not trying to give you a hard time. They're having one. They're having one. Find out what it is, and it will be okay for you too, once you
And
find the solution.
and again, I'm not, I don't want to infantilize our elders or compare them to animals, but as you were talking about potentially Chanel's mother being in pain, I was reflecting on my dog and some of who has just gone through some removal of cancer, and sort of the detective work that we did to figure out where
Mm-hmm.
she is in pain. And a lot of it is observation, and it's seeing favoring one side of our body or the other, or just not responding, like you said, Katya, move your foot, and it's sort of like not being able to prescribe to the traditional labels and languages
Mm-hmm.
that we use. It's man, holy cow. I'm looking and we burned through an hour. Not surprisingly, this is a fascinating topic of discussion, and I admire so much your journey and your background and what led you to this. So I'm gonna make sure that all your contact info is on the recording, but just share with us, a little bit about how folks who should get in touch with you and what their expectations could be when we can obviously order the book and read the book, but if folks wanted to reach out to you at the Dementia Learning Institute, what's the experience that they might
All right. First of all, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not a coach. I'm a fixer. In other words, come to me with something that you need to find solutions for. And then we work together because you have the solution. You just don't realize it because it's a fog of all of the things that you have to solve. So often you need another person to just start to clear the path. Okay. And once you start finding your problem solving abilities and start to fine tune them, it becomes easier for caregiving because a lot of the problems that seem so big are actually not that big. It's just the fact that you're so bombarded with so many of them, so many problems. So I help people to fine tune core issues. What is the main issue that's happening? And it's not just about caregiving, because often it's about your own self and how you are going to have to become more self-aware in order to care for someone, because they're going to trigger stuff that if you're not self-aware about yourself, that's going to get out of control. So I try to help with your own self-awareness and to help you to solve specific issues that you need to have solved, whether they're emotional or whether they have to do with care or whether it just has to do with depression, whatever. But I am not, like I say, I'm not a support group. So when you tell me your problem, if you're needing to just vent, you need to find a support group, because I'm there to help you move beyond that. I try to help you move beyond being the victim.
got it.
And it's very hard not to feel the victim
Oh
when
no,
you're caring with somebody with dementia.
man. Well, this is great. And I tell you what, let's
Uh-oh, you
hour.
froze.
I have that video of the former ballerina all queued up. And why don't I'm going to say thank you to you, Katya. This was wonderful. And then I'm just going to share this video in closing, I think it's a wonderful way to inspire us all. What do you think, Katya?
I agree 100%. It's a
Okay,
wonderful
great.
video.
So, okay, you can see my screen there. All right, here we go, folks. And have a great weekend. And we'll close with this video here.
Oh, I love that video.
That was wonderful. All right, thank you, everybody.